Jack Parry. I'm actually currently based in London, but been moving over to New York, and I've recently joined the team with Chris, Jacob, and Skylar. Um, we've also got Laura Peterson here presenting today, um, and I'm just going to take you through a little bit of remote admin. Just so you're aware, these are the leaders of the New York Tableau user group. So we've got myself and Chris who are here today. Tyler and Jacob are not here, but they'll be present in a future sessions. So if you see me and Chris around on the tables, feel free to drop in and say hi. It'd be nice to get to know all of you. So with Remo, we've got this concept of lots of different tables where you can jump around and chat to different people. So you'll be dumped onto a table when you first join, and you can chat to the people on that table, or if you see some conversations or people you might want to talk to on a different table, you can just double click and move over to that table. Once you're on a table, you're going to want to turn your camera on and turn your microphone on. I mean, you don't have to turn either of them on. You could just sit there and observe the conversation, but if you want to engage with others, at least turn your microphone on and then people will be able to hear you. You'll be able to engage in the conversation. You can flip between different views, so you'll be able to see the whole group view, or you'll be able to see this tile view as well if you want everyone to be sort of in a grid like you're used to on other video conference platforms. Once we kick off the presentations like we're doing now, you'll see the group presentation pop up. So only myself and other speakers will be on the stage. We'll be able to turn our cameras and microphones on and off. We can invite people to the stage if you do want to ask a question. So you'll be able to put that in the chat, which I'll call out in just a second. But we have this presentation mode. And then when we come out of that, we'll go back to the virtual networking with all the tables where you can hop around and chat to lots of different people. As I mentioned, there's this chat option in the toolbar along the bottom. So you do have the general chat, which is everyone in the session, and then you'll have a chat for your table. So when you go into the presentation mode, you still will be able to talk via the chat to people on your table, or you can post in the general chat. You'll also notice in this presentation space that there's a Q&A over on the right-hand side. So if you do have any questions for myself or Laura during her presentation, then you can put them in there and we'll get to them at the end of the session. Just before we kick things off, we've got some future announcements about user groups. So we've got a in-person user group coming up in March. So we'll have Anne Jackson, who's just joined the Information Lab as the new head coach of the data school in New York, talking about a really important chapter of her Tableau Strategies book. So that will be on the 22nd of March at the Data School New York's office on 28 Liberty Street. We're going to limit the capacity of that session just because we know things are not quite back to normal yet with COVID still going on. So we don't want anything to be too overcrowded or people to feel uncomfortable. But it'd be really great to see some of you at that session if you want to come along. And we'll be giving away 3 copies of her book as well. So if you're there, you'll have a chance to win one of those. And we're going to open RSVPs tomorrow for those people at this event. So if you've attended this, we'll follow up with an invitation to that event if you do want to come along to the in-person session. And then we'll open up RSVPs to a wider audience in the coming days after that. So keep your eyes peeled for that tomorrow if you do want to get involved in the March user group. And just before we dive into Laura, we've got a brief Kahoot quiz just to gather your thoughts and feelings on attending in-person user groups, whether you'd be interested in a sort of a Slack channel for the user group, and also what kinds of sessions you want to see at future user groups. So we're going to go through that quickly, and then we'll dive into Laura's presentation. So I just want to check no one's in the lobby. Oh, there are 3 guests. Oh, I've just managed to turn it off. Okay, that won't happen. Apologies if you're just waiting in the lobby. Whilst I'm presenting, I couldn't add more people. Let me just... Is my audio okay? can try and come closer to the microphone.
Yeah, no, it improved within the first minute. So
okay, cool, fine. So yeah, before we get going with Laura, we're just going to dive into this Kahoot quiz. So if you want to either scan the QR code up here, you can make it big, or add that game pin. We've just got a few questions to gather some thoughts and feelings about future sessions. Of course, yeah, we just want to see what everyone's thinking. So I'll give everyone a moment or two to join. You'll see your name pop up once you're successfully in, and then we'll get going. I'll give it another 30 seconds or so. I know there's a few more people in the event than that have appeared here. So either go to kahoot.it and put in the game pin, or you should be able to scan the QR code with your phone, or with the Kahoot app if you're a Kahoot regular. Okay, we're going to get going. So oh God, it's very quiz-like. So the first thing we want to know is, would you be comfortable in attending an in-person user group? So we're sort of doing the session with Anne as a trial run to see what people's feelings are towards an in-person. I appreciate some people might not feel comfortable doing that. If you are slightly uncomfortable, we do have a follow-up question, which we look at what would make you feel more comfortable with attending those kinds of sessions. But it's good to get a feel as to whether people would want that, because we're keen to get back to those in-person events when possible. But okay, so about 50-50. That's good to know that people are keen to get back to those. And for those that aren't, don't worry, we're not going to suddenly just only do in-person events, just to get a good feel for where people are at. So following on from that, if you are a bit unsure, what measures could we put in place to make you feel more comfortable? I appreciate for some people this might just be a straight up no. I don't want to come to any in-person events, but if there are certain measures that can be put in place to make you feel more comfortable, then we'd be happy to hear them and try to accommodate those. Even if you are happy to attend, then feel free to stick in any suggestions that you might have. I appreciate not everyone might want to answer this question, just because if you're okay with coming to the events, you might not have anything to say here, but it'd be good to get all kinds of feedback from any angle possible. Just a few more seconds to submit. If you do want to submit, get those answers in quickly. We'll take these answers away. I don't want, well, actually, no, we can see. That's what we say. Okay, that's fine. So we're looking at, hybrid events, vaccine, mask, candy bars. We can work that out. Cool. Cocktails to kill germs. That's fine. We can work with cocktails and candy bars for sure. We can get those at some of the sessions. So a slightly quicker answer here. So if we are looking at doing some in person, some remote, we can look at those in person ones being able to join in a hybrid fashion. But what format would you ideally want? Do we want, I appreciate it's not going to be 100% in person, but if we're looking at either all of the user groups in person, none of them virtual, 75-25, 50-50, or more remote, less in person. Just a few more seconds to get your answer in. Okay, 50-50, or leaning on the, some people are keen, get me back to in person. No more of this remote, joining Zoom calls, a remote platform, but that's good to know. At least we'll be able to accommodate that. And with that March session with Anne, we will look at setting up some kind of hybrid link. So as much as you might not be there for the networking, at least you'll be able to see Anne's presentation. And something that we've been discussing as a group of leaders and to try and build a more of a community around this tug is, would you be interested in having sort of a New York City Tableau Slack channel where you could connect to other users, you could get help with technical solutions if people wanted to help out, bit of networking in there. We could use it as a job board. So if people have got vacancies in New York City, they could put it up on there. Something we were interested in. Okay, that's good to know. No one's, well, one person having none of it, but it's good to see that people would be interested in that. So yeah, we can give that a go. Obviously you could just mute notifications, you could just leave at any point. So we'll see if we can set that up and trial it and go from there. And then the final question we've got is what types of events would you like to see from us? So obviously we've got Laura today talking about overcoming that fear of failure, but are you more interested in customer stories? Are you interested in Tableau tips, things around data visualization theory and best practice? Anything you want, really. Well, within reason, related to Tableau. Otherwise, I don't know if Tableau support these events if we're just hosting them for other reasons. And following on from this, if you have any other ideas that you want to share with myself or Chris, one of us will be sat at, there's a table in the top left of the room that just says user group ideas as the name instead of like table 1, table 2, etc. So one of us will be sat there where you can just come. Obviously we can have a conversation about whatever you want, but if you've got specific ideas about the user group, in-person events, if you want to come and speak at an event, we'd love to have some attendees come and share their own customer stories or their own tips, whatever you want really. But come and grab us and we're all ears to your suggestions. So we've got 10 answers there. Let's see. Tips, great visits, UI, UX, career opportunities, customer stories. Okay, cool. Happy hours, is that in terms of drinking? Is that the same person that submitted about cocktails? We can work with that. But thank you all for participating in that. It's really useful for us to collect some feedback. And as we move back to the sort of hybrid or semi-in-person workspace, we want to just be able to incorporate everyone's thoughts and feelings to make the user group a success for you guys as well. So with that, Laura is our speaker. Laura Peterson, she's the BI enablement lead for the Americas at JLL. So Laura, if you want to turn your camera on and unmute yourself, then you'll be able to come on stage and I will stop sharing my screen.
Hi all. Jack, thank you for the great introduction.
That's all right.
Let me see if I can share my slides. Let me know. Let me know when you guys can see.
Yep, can see that.
Wonderful.
Just before you dive into it, if you do have, we'll do a little Q&A with Laura at the end of the session. So please use the Q&A box over on the right-hand side. and then we'll get to any of those that we can at the end. Over to you.
Great, thanks, Jack. So today I'll be talking about conquering my fear of feedback, not necessarily failure, although I am acutely afraid of failure as well. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. As Jack said, I am the BI Enablement Regional Lead at JLL, so I'm working on the Americas region. I am a Tableau Forums ambassador this year. I started using Tableau around 5 years ago at the Information Lab in London. I was part of the data school, cohort 5. I moved to New York City from London back in 2019. I love French bulldogs. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I have a small French bulldog named Sadie, who is nothing but drama. And I was diagnosed with dyslexia and ADHD as an adult. So that may seem like a random thing to add, but I promise it is relevant to the presentation and will come up later. So before we dive into how I conquered my fear of feedback, let's start from the beginning and examine why I had a fear of feedback. Where was this coming from? So part of it was imposter syndrome. You know, when someone doubts their accomplishments and achievements to the point where they're afraid of being exposed as a fraud. There's a ton of talent out there in the Tableau community, and it can be easy to think, oh no, they'll find out I'm not as good as they think I am. All sorts of inhibitive thoughts like that. And imposter syndrome, I forget who did the presentation, maybe it was Emily Kund, but 70% of adults, I think, will experience imposter syndrome in one form or another in their lives. And so the second reason I was fearing feedback was the fear of rejection. So no one likes getting their feelings hurt. No one likes having harsh things said to them. A little bit of that. And then the third thing that was really amplifying the first two is my neurodiversity. So my ADHD was working against me in a big way. When most people hear ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, you think about attention deficit and hyperactivity. It's actually, I think, a very poorly named syndrome, but in addition to being unable to regulate your attention effectively, one of the symptoms that I suffer from is rejection sensitivity. So my brain is just wired a little differently. I struggle with the emotional rationalization and personalization of comments. So in terms of emotional rationalization, I struggle to, neurotypicals are usually able to differentiate between I feel rejected and I am being rejected. That's a little bit harder for me to make that connection. And in terms of personalization, I know a lot of people struggle with taking things personally that really aren't meant that way, but it's very hard for my brain to think something like, I don't like your viz, and not think that means they don't like me. Obviously, that those two are not the same, but I'm really sort of my own worst enemy in this case, and it makes me prone personally to sort of overreaction, unnecessarily I don't know. I wouldn't say I was been prone to outbursts or anything, but really just maybe being accused of being too sensitive or overly sensitive. And there's nothing I can change about this sensitivity or rejection. I will always have it, but knowing and getting that ADHD diagnosis and really understanding how my brain works has really helped me to develop strategies in coping. And it's definitely helped me overcome some of the fear of feedback. So at this point, I feel like some of you might be thinking, wait a second, didn't Laura just say she went to data school? Isn't a huge part of data school dealing with feedback, being able to accept feedback and giving each other feedback constantly? This kind of sounds like baloney, Laura. How is it possible that you survived DS successfully and are still afraid of feedback? Well, let me tell you. It is absolutely true about data school, by the way. Feedback is a huge part of it. But I wasn't dealing with a lot of these things. So imposter syndrome didn't really come into it at the DS because I was a bona fide beginner. No one expected me to be good at anything. So I didn't feel like a fraud. I was genuinely a beginner, and it was okay for me to not know what I was doing. I was okay with not being, accepting when you're learning something, you're not good at it straight away. No one becomes a superstar overnight. The second thing that really helped me in data school to not fear feedback or react in an inappropriate way was the transparency of it. The way that my head coach at the time, Andy Kriebel, ran our data school was really transparent. The nature of the feedback is that it happened all the time, and it always happened in the group. It was happening in front of everybody. No one was being pulled aside, having private chats. Everyone was being given feedback all of the time. Everyone could hear it and everyone could join in. So it was really easy for me to see that this wasn't personal. This was clearly happening to everybody. If we had been having those private chats where it wasn't so transparent as to what people were saying to everybody else, things might have turned out differently. I could have easily thought, oh, this isn't for me. Oh, they don't like me at all. Oh, all of those things that don't make any sense and I should not have felt. So yes, I did survive data school and I didn't really occur to me at the time that feedback was something that I was always going to have to, or should always seek. So I took a lot of comfort at the time in the fact that I thought that feedback was only necessary when I was first learning Tableau. Oh, it's okay for me to be getting all this feedback. I'm a beginner. That's fine, of course. Once I reach a certain level, a skill level, comfort in the tool, I won't need feedback anymore. False. I'm here to tell you that is not true. In fact, the more involved I've gotten in the community, the more I realize that the community leaders, the Zen masters and Tableau ambassadors, are some of the people who ask for feedback the most on their visits. And I think that probably has a lot to do with how they continue to be so successful and how they continue to produce really interesting and inspired content. So now that I've covered that, let's get to conquering my fear. So I did take a really long look at myself when I realized, yeah, I did do DS and I wasn't afraid of feedback. I was able to receive it easily, not take it personally, and I wasn't afraid to share my content or put it out there. So what made that different? Why was I able to successfully navigate feedback in that environment, but not in others? And so one of the things that I already touched on was a safe space. For me, the DS was a safe space. It was a place where you could learn and make mistakes, and it was fine. So that was the first aha moment. If I want to be good and capable of receiving feedback and seeking feedback in a community, I need to create a safe space for myself to receive this feedback. The second thing I realized was that feedback could be kind of harsh, or tended to be more harsh if you weren't using a feedback model. The other thing I learned was that it's better to be specific when you can, if possible. So I'm now going to go into each of these aspects and how they helped me in more detail. Create a safe space. I know this won't apply to everybody. Some people have loads of confidence and are not intimidated by this process. But as a neurodivergent person, who I certainly know I'm not the only one in the community, I wanted to go ahead and share it in case it might help anyone else. But for me, creating a safe space is creating a safe space mentally, getting my head in the right place to receive feedback. So I do that using the EAR method. Evaluate, appropriate, reframe. So first, I need to evaluate where I am mentally. Recognizing my own emotional state is key. You want to be able to enter a feedback session for your visualizations with a clear mind and as calm as you possibly can. So if I had something else in my life going on where I asked someone to go to the movies and they said no, or some other element of rejection, or something was happening where I was already sort of in the red, if we think of a calm state of mind as a gauge going from red, yellow to green, if I'm already in the red, I'm not going to be receptive to feedback about my data visualization. So entering, being able to look inside myself and say, am I in a good place to have this feedback session now? Yes. Okay, great. The next thing is to have appropriate response strategies to keep me from overreacting. So to have in my back pocket a couple of techniques to calm myself down. If I feel myself going from green into that yellow or red, if I start getting defensive, or I feel myself getting hot, I know that I can just take some deep breaths. But I can recognize where I am and that I need to bring myself back down to a green state if I want to avoid overreacting. And then finally, reframe. So when I'm receiving feedback, I like to reflect on what's being said and reframe the advice. These are facts that I'm hearing. What's the point of view of the person giving the feedback? Where is their mind at when they're telling me these facts? Reframing can be really helpful in creating distance between yourself and the visualization. So it's not, this is my precious piece of work that I've spent a long time developing. This is a dashboard. This is someone else's interpretation of the dashboard. It just makes me less likely to feel personally attacked, when clearly there's no intention for a personal attack in dashboard feedback. So hopefully someone finds this helpful. If not, it's good to think about when giving feedback or approaching feedback from others to just try to stay calm and not take things personally if you can. My next tip was to use a feedback model. So when I say feedback model, I'm really talking about forum and format. So the forum, where are you asking for feedback? Are you posting something on Twitter and saying feedback welcome? Or have you asked a specific person for feedback via email? Are you doing this in person? Is it a one-on-one session, or are you doing it as a group with multiple people commenting on the dashboard? Is it live or is it recorded feedback? these all come into play when receiving feedback. So think about what's best for you and what you're trying to get out of it. That brings me onto format. What are you trying to get out of it? How is your viz going to be evaluated? How do you want the viz to be evaluated? Formatting? Should I be looking at spelling, sizing and alignment, font size? Or should I be looking at the content? Is this the right chart to tell this story? Should I be analyzing the analysis? Is average the right thing to use here? Does this make sense? Talking on the storytelling. The other thing that comes into play for format is sort of what I call free text versus a guided script. So free text is what I'm calling just a free-for-all. No guidelines or guidance is being given to the person giving the feedback. They can say anything they want, which can be helpful sometimes if you want an honest opinion. Or what we do at JLL in our viz reviews is we have a specific script. So we say, okay, this is the viz, and you were able to say, I like this about the viz, and then I suggest. So that is people to use when reviewing a viz and giving feedback. All of these things are helpful to avoid unintentionally hurtful comments, things that can come off. But if, no one is out there trying to destroy your day or really hurt your feelings. So all of this is good to to keep in mind. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Sarah Bartlett's Iron Quest program. I think that is a great example of a good feedback model. People know, it's really clear what she's going to be giving feedback on when you submit your viz for review using the Iron Viz analysis guidelines, and the feedback is recorded. So it's a voice that you're hearing versus text that you're reading. Sometimes intention or nuance doesn't always come across the same way when it's written as it does when you hear someone say it. So I think she's done a great job, and that's a great example to look to. Another good example, and I don't want to talk about JLL too much, is how we've currently set up our viz reviews. So we have 2 separate review sessions. There's the peer reviews, which I would consider just a general review where we're focused on story, content. Is this the right way to visualize, what we're trying to get across? Do you have any great ideas? Has anyone else looked at this before? And people volunteer for that. They say, I'm in the middle of my viz process and I would like some feedback on this. I want to see if anyone else, have people weigh in. And then everybody can weigh in. And it's really clear what's happening. The second feedback session is when you're ready to publish. You're saying, okay, I've got my story nailed down. I'm happy with my charts. This is it. We're ready to go. So someone please look at the formatting. Nothing to do with the story or the chart, but really just looking at spacing, text size, making sure that it's in alignment with our corporate branding and viz guidelines. But there's nothing, that can distract more from a good story than fonts being different sizes, colors not being applied appropriately, and just general misalignment of things. So having those 2 specific sessions and knowing what to expect in each of those, I've found very helpful. this brings me to my third and final tip for how I conquered my fear of feedback is being specific. Giving feedback can be difficult, having sat on the other side of the table. No one has coached me, or I mean, I can't speak for all members of the Tableau community, but I think very few of us have had coaching or training on how to give feedback well. No one is out to get you, like I said before. But one of the things that I fear most is feedback welcome. Like, here's my viz, feedback welcome. For me, that's just not enough information. Not enough to go on. I need more context. Where are you in your process? Like I mentioned before, are you still in the design mode? Should I be asking you about your analysis and the story? Or are you about to go live tomorrow? In which case, my comments on the analysis really aren't welcome or helpful. You just want to know about the spelling. So if you have a specific question that you want answered or you're interested in, just ask. I find that's really helpful. Like, can you please check my spelling on this? Being dyslexic as well as ADHD means that I'm super prone and really need feedback because there still is no spell check in Tableau, unfortunately. What's my other example? I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking like a maniac in the background. Please ignore that. But yeah, back to what I was saying. Yeah, ask for what you want. If you, the other thing that I found with giving feedback is sometimes people are disappointed where they've said, oh, feedback welcome. And people have said, oh, I love it. Or, you know, without commenting on something specific. Or I wish I had heard more about this. And they really wanted to know, oh, no one said anything about if I was using the right chart, or no one said anything about this. I was hoping to hear more about X, Y, and Z. So try to examine what you're looking for when it comes to feedback. And that's, I found incredibly helpful when I'm asking for feedback and when I'm giving it. It's incredibly helpful to know what the person wants my feedback on specifically. Sometimes people don't know, and that's okay. And then I'm just gonna do a generic up and down mix of content and format and comments. But it really does help if you can be specific about what you're asking for. So in conclusion, don't be afraid to share your work. The immortal words of my data school head coach, Andy Kriebel. Please don't be afraid to share. The community is incredibly welcoming and genuinely want to help others. So we're all friends here. Don't be afraid. Thank you guys so much for listening. And my Twitter handle is Miss Laura203. Feel free to give me a follow. And I guess I'll hand it back to Jack now to do Q&A if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. That was really, really great. I think it's a really important topic to talk about because, you know, I've certainly had times where you build stuff and it's easy to get attached almost to your work when in reality you're building it for someone else. It doesn't really involve you from a personal perspective, but you put so much time into it, it's difficult to remove yourself from that situation. So I think it's valuable for everyone. There is a question that's come in from Sid that says, are there any cases where the feedback model was used for stakeholder / end user input and not just peer-to-peer / job evaluation?
Yes. So I've used a feedback model more loosely when I'm talking to stakeholders about a project at work. I'm not as, also tend to one of the other things that I think about when I'm being specific is keep in mind who you're asking for this feedback and for this review. If someone says, I don't like your viz, and they know nothing about data visualization and they're not in the community, I'm not going to take that personally, versus coming from a Zen master, my feelings might be a little bit more hurt. So with its stakeholders who I don't necessarily know what their experience level with data visualization is, if this is someone who I'm building dashboards with a lot, then sort of know what's possible and maybe have the language and the tools to feedback appropriately. But what I do is I say, okay, especially early in a project where the data might not be all sorted out yet, we'll say, all right, I just want to check in. This is what we've designed so far. This is the wire framing, if you will, or sketch of what we want to create. Does this answer your questions? Really using that being specific. Is this what you were hoping to see? What question do you want this data to answer? Were you hoping for any insights? Really understand what they're looking to get out of the dashboard, and listen attentively to what they're saying, to see how I should change my design based on that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, because you're coming from a data visualization background. You're going to have very different opinions to someone that doesn't, and their opinions can be wildly different in terms of expectation and what they're going to get. And so if you can gather those requirements up front, then that's really useful. And also, if you're open to, you sometimes have to not wear people down, but like show them what's possible with data visualization, because people will be very set on what they want, and then you can show them things and they're like, oh, actually.
Sometimes I don't say anything though. I'm not going against my advice, but I just want to hear their gut reaction. I want to hear their initial thoughts. And if it's something like, okay, so what is this telling me? What am I supposed to see here? Then that means I haven't been clear enough on illustrating what this chart shows. Or if they're like, oh gosh, either bright colors too much, or, oh, I didn't expect that number to be so big. Need to take that into account, because maybe the point isn't to alarm the end user. Maybe I need to add more context to, there are 75 open work orders. Oh no, that seems like a high number. Oh, out of 300 that have been entered this week. Oh, okay, that's not as bad as I thought. Right. So.
Yeah. No, that's a useful tactic. Just sit and observe the reaction.
Does anybody else have any tips on feedback, or either how to give it well or how to receive it? I'm always trying to improve, and because I know I'm so sensitive, or can be so sensitive to feedback, to give it in a way that's thoughtful. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, if anyone's got any suggestions right now, I can probably bring you on stage. If not, then obviously we'll go back to the tables in a moment, and then we can chat to Laura and everyone more widely. I was going to say, with your new role as an enablement lead, do you find yourself, helping others out with this kind of situation increasingly more?
Definitely. In my role as an enablement lead, I'm going to be conducting a lot of the feedback sessions that I talked about. So running the peer reviews, and also running the Viz guideline sessions at the end. So we want to be able to, would teach a person to fish, set it up, have a good example of what kind and what type of feedback we're looking for, and how constructive that is. It's also really valuable to be on the receiving side of that and realizing, oh, this has actually improved my, I've got some really good comments here, to see how things have changed based on the feedback you've gotten, and how helpful it can be. And then for people who are interested in learning how to or become one of the peer reviewers, we can teach them more about what the expectation is and how to not necessarily be less direct, but how to be direct and say what you mean without sounding hypercritical.
Yeah. And that's what I've like, when you say that, it makes me think of Andy Kriebel, because
Yes.
like, he's not trying to criticize your work. He's more just saying, well, why have you done that? I want to understand. But he gets the delivery of that right, whereas other people, you know, the tone of voice, or just how it's pitched can be knock you off guard, I guess.
Right. There have been a lot of great blogs written about this as well. I should mention Adam Miko did a great blog recently about sort of the forum. You know, if you're asking for feedback on Twitter, there's a content limit or character limit to what you can say. And you might just get a lot of generic, oh, I like it, or I don't like it, versus why. So
Okay.
yeah, there's a couple others. So
well, maybe you could, if you've got those to hand, maybe you could share them with the group after the session. We can share them out over email, or I don't know, if you tweet them out, you can always, everyone can give you a follow and find them there. But if there are no further questions for Laura, then we can jump back to the tables. As I said at the beginning, you can turn your camera and microphone on at the bottom. You can double click to hop around different tables, chat to different people. Go ahead, chat to Laura about feedback, how you might be giving and receiving that in your organization. As I mentioned earlier, one of Chris or myself will be on that top left table, looking to talk about anything the user group related, or if you just want to chat and catch up. We'll send out the invite links for the March in-person session with Anne. The invite for that will be for the in-person tickets, and then we will work out how we can do a sort of hybrid thing in the meantime, but that initial registration will be for the in-person event. But otherwise, thank you, Laura, so much. That was a really great presentation, and hopefully see you all on the tables.
Thank you for having me. I just posted the link to Adam's blog in the group chat that he did.
Perfect, yeah.
Another member of the neurodiverse squad. So
brilliant.
Really
great. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you on the tables.